Good evening. It's now 6 p.m. and the regular session of the Planning Commission of the City of Lancaster will please come to order. And if you guys are passing out cards, Carl, Jim, Carl, you can pass out your cards over here too. It's all right. It's kind of like being at home. It's very friendly. The only thing we don't have is refreshments, unfortunately. Tonight the invocation will be offered by Vice Chair Hall, and the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Commissioner Cook. So if you'd all please stand.
Bow your heads and pray with me. Thank you, God, for your blessings on our city. Thank you for guiding staff and preparing this meeting. Thank you for my fellow commissioners by guiding their decisions and discussions. God, hold fast the families of those officers slain in Dallas, Brent Thompson, Patrick Zampera, Michael Kroll, Michael Smith, and our own Lauren Earthens. God, hold fast the families of those officers slain in Baton Rouge, Montel Jackson, Matthew Gerald, and Brad Garfola. Thank you, God, for these centurions that stood between us and the abyss. Send our prayers to all who serve and protect and continue to comfort their families, and I pray you usher in your peace and love. God, I pray your blessings on our troops and their families. I ask for your blessings on the citizens of France, especially those families in Nice that had loved ones killed or hurt in a recent terrorist attack. Let us remember Lou Bozigian, and we ask you, God, to comfort his family and friends. Thank you, God, for comforting the Runner family, and I pray you welcome Sharon Runner, who was your good and faithful servant, into your outstretched arms. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Repeat after me. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May I have the roll call, please?
Commissioners Deanna Cook,
Present.
Miguel Coronado, absent. Cassandra Harvey, absent. Sandy Smith,
Here.
Vice Chair Randy Hall,
Here.
Chairman James Vose.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Just barely tonight. Thanks for coming back early, Commissioner Cook. Public business from the floor. If individuals are unable to stay for the entire meeting, we offer a 10-minute window of opportunity to address us tonight on an agenda item. If you would please fill out a speaker's card and identify the fact that you want to be an early speaker, we'll hear you now. Do we have any early speakers?
None that have indicated, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Therefore, any person who would like to address the Commission on any agendized item is asked to fill out a speaker's card. So we will call upon you then when the item is called so we can hear your testimony and consider what you have to say. For those of you who do not attend these regularly, a bit of background. This commission meets twice a month. Generally, we meet 1 week prior to this meeting with our staff, and we review the proposed agenda for this evening. We take staff input. However, we do not deliberate nor do we vote. It is a public meeting, and public may come and observe. However, we do not accept testimony. It is a agendized meeting subject to the Brown Act. However, as I mentioned, we do not deliberate nor vote. I mention it because oftentimes folks wonder why we'll open an item for discussion. We'd have no public testimony, a action item to approve, no comments, and the vote is taken. Quite often that's because we've already satisfied ourselves with the agenda item and have taken input from staff and made our own investigation, we're prepared to move on the matter. So if you do have anything to offer tonight, please feel free to fill out a speaker's card, and we'd be happy to listen to what you have to say. First item, action item, is the approval of the minutes of the meeting of June 20th. Have a motion, please?
I move to accept the minutes from June 20th, 2016.
Second.
Thank you. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. With my colleagues' permission, I'd like to move agenda item new business number 7. It's a report on discussion of land use implications of recreational marijuana. Our Assistant City Attorney, Ms. Corbett, will give that presentation. If anyone has any comments on that before we start, do we have any speaker cards on that item?
No, Mr. Chairman.
None? All right. Anybody have an overwhelming need to talk to us tonight? Nope? All right. Ms. Corbett?
Thank you, Chairman Vos. At the regular City Council meeting of June 28th, Public Safety Director Lita Rico and I gave an update to the Council on the current status of state marijuana law, sort of the city's position in how things are playing out right now, and the potential ballot initiative to legalize marijuana altogether. Since then, the initiative, in fact, qualified for the ballot, so it will be on the November ballot. It's called the Adult Use of Marijuana Act. It is Proposition 64. So I just wanted to give you kind of a brief refresher on where we are right now, and then because a lot of what's happening with the medical marijuana at the state level is mirrored by Prop 64's language for recreational marijuana as well. At the beginning of this year, the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act was enacted and became effective. The various bills comprising the act established a statewide system for licensing and regulating medical commercial cannabis activity, including cultivation, dispensaries, deliveries, transportation, and other activities. The act establishes that a number of state agencies will have responsibility to oversee various aspects of the medical commercial cannabis industry. So the California Department of Consumer Affairs has created a Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation, which will be responsible for licenses for the dispensaries, distributors, and transporters. The Department of Public Health has created an Office of Medical Cannabis Safety, which will be responsible for licensing the testing laboratories and for licensing manufacturers of medical cannabis products like edibles, concentrated cannabis, topical applications, and the like. And then we have the Department of Food and Agriculture that has created a Division of Inspection Services Medical Cannabis Cultivation Program, which will be responsible for licensing cultivators and establishing a track and trace program. Will implement regulations to ensure that cultivation is in accordance with all applicable laws concerning land conversion, grading, electricity usage, water usage, agricultural discharges, etc. The medical cannabis cultivation program also will work in consultation with Fish and Wildlife and the State Water Resources Control Board concerning the effects of water diversion and discharge related to outdoor cultivation, and will consult with the Department of Pesticide Regulation, which must promulgate regulations concerning the application of pesticides. So there are a lot of players and a lot of regulations to put together in these various agencies. From the implementation of the Act, the expectation was that these various agencies would have their regulations in place and ready to go January of 2018. I've checked all of their websites, and that is still their timeline for getting all of those pieces in place. So at the local level, currently, that Act provides that a local jurisdiction may adopt ordinances that establish additional requirements and regulations for local licensing concerning commercial medical cannabis activity. But any requirements and regulations regarding health and safety, testing, security, and worker protections established by the state must be the minimum standards statewide in any jurisdiction. So this means that until such time as the state regulations are implemented, the city would be responsible for overseeing all aspects of the local cannabis activity without knowing what the standards at the state level are going to be, which might make it a little bit tricky in terms of what we might want to establish now and then what would happen January 2018. It's important to note that the Act contains a provision that imposes a burden on cities even after the state regulations are in place. If the state delegates to the cities, then the city shall have full power and authority to enforce the state law and the associated regulations for state licensed facilities located in that city. And here's the good one. The city shall assume complete responsibility for any regulatory function relating to those licensees within the city limits that would otherwise be performed by the county or any county officer or employee, including a county health officer, without liability, cost, or expense to the county. Yes. So, currently, in the current law, there are some conflicting provisions impacting whether a person may engage in cultivation and how and whether a person may do so. New law in the Business and Professions Code provides that once the state agencies have implemented the licensing regulations, then you can't cultivate without both the city license and the state license. The Health and Safety Code provisions, however, expressly state that a person or entity shall not cultivate medical marijuana without first obtaining both the local and the state license. So under the Health and Safety Code, the implication is nobody should be cultivating right now, unless you're just a standard collective, which is exempted from the Medical Marijuana Act. That conflict is a little problematic, it's a little challenging, and it seems to me that those local jurisdictions that have adopted ordinances to allow some form of cultivation are relying on the somewhat more lax language in the Business and Professions Code. That's the only way I can see that they're determining that they're authorized to do that at this point in time. So we move on to Proposition 64, which is called the Adult Use of Marijuana Act. It has qualified for the November ballot, as I said. If it passes, it will go into effect the day after Election Day. However, the Act expressly provides that those various state agencies shall begin issuing licenses January 2018. And those agencies are the same ones that are currently in charge of the Medical Marijuana Act. So, again, the timeline is the same. We're looking at about a year and a half from now before those regulations will be implemented. The standards for testing and so forth, and toxicity and potency and all of that will be in place. It is important to note that Prop 64 does contain several contradictory provisions, including those that directly impact the city's authority to regulate. In one section, it expressly says that the Act will allow local governments to reasonably regulate the cultivation of non-medical marijuana and only to ban outdoor cultivation as set forth in the Act. Somewhere else, though, it says that nothing in the division shall be interpreted to supersede or limit the authority of a local jurisdiction to adopt and enforce local ordinances, including the authority to completely prohibit the establishment or operation of one or more types of businesses licensed under this division within the local jurisdiction. So again, if we decided as a city that we wanted to ban everything, keep the ordinance that we have currently in place, which prohibits all sort of marijuana activity, could we? Could we not? It's really not clear. Prop 64 also has some language that expressly authorizes the legislature to go back and fix anything that's a problem. So sorry, I don't mean to laugh. It's not actually, funny, haha. So that's where we're at. So as you'll recall, we currently have an ordinance in place that prohibits dispensaries, deliveries, cultivating, whether indoor or outdoor. That's been in effect since about, I believe, March of this year. At the June 28th City Council meeting, we were directed to to look into, to discuss, and to bring back to the council 2 alternative proposals. One is essentially to keep the ban in place that we have right now with perhaps some modifications of some form or another. And the other is to explore, can we craft some regulations that will protect public safety and public health, make sure that there's not an increase in criminal activity associated with the marijuana business, and generate some revenue for the city and allow more ready access to marijuana. And of course, if the legalization comes into effect, frankly, I don't even know how that's going to play out. It's not clear what level of authority the city is going to have to prohibit, and how far can we prohibit, and what can we prohibit. It's just not clear at all. So it occurs to Mr. Ludicky and me that probably a good place for this commission to start is just beginning to have a general conversation about cultivation. So that's most clearly the land use implication of the marijuana industry. Do you want to talk about allowing indoor cultivation? Do you want to talk about outdoor cultivation? Do you want to treat it like an adult-oriented business and limit it to certain zones? Do you want to treat it like alfalfa? I don't know. What size do you want to limit it to if you want to? So there are a lot of cultivation-related questions that certainly we could get the ball rolling in that regard. In terms of actually crafting an ordinance, certainly we want to take something back to council and continue our updates and our discussions about this. In some ways, it doesn't necessarily make sense to have an ordinance presented until after the November election, because it's just not clear whether it's going to pass or not. I have no feel for it one way or the other. So that's really all I have at the moment. I'm certainly available for any questions you might have, but it seems to me prudent to start with the conversation about cultivation. That seems like the most reasonable place to begin.
Thank you, Ms. Corbett. There may be some questions or comments from members.
Can I ask you about water usage? I mean, certainly that's a huge... I'm sorry, I've got my mic off. I'm loud enough, though. Water usage... I really don't have any clue what it takes to grow a healthy cannabis crop. So,
I actually X'd this out. I thought I would save it for another conversation. But let me go ahead and give you some details about the environmental effects of cultivation. And indoor cultivation has its own environmental impact, and outdoor cultivation has its own. So indoor grow operations are estimated to account for 1% of total electricity use. That's about equal to the amount of electricity used by every computer in every home and apartment in the country annually. Indoor growers plug into the grid, about 2/3 of which is generated by fossil fuels. 1 pound of marijuana grown indoors is about equivalent to 1.95 metric tons of carbon dioxide. 3 cross-country trips in a 45-mile-per-gallon hybrid car, or 2,095 pounds of coal burned. Outdoor cultivation has different impacts, specifically concerning the use of pesticides and rat poisons, which are consumed by various animals and move up the food chain. It's also estimated that marijuana requires 6 gallons of water per day per plant over the summer. For comparison, an energy-efficient dishwasher uses about 4 gallons per use. So 6 gallons a day per plant versus 4 gallons of use for a dishwasher. And plants, I mean, even the illegal grow houses that we have occasionally seen here in the city, a decent-sized house, you can have 600, 800 plants. That's a lot of water.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
So the eyebrow-raising thing, you said the city is responsible for ensuring that the marijuana would be safe and pesticide-free, and is that going to be like a whole new department here at the city? Or is it going to be enforced by a business licensing that is going to be pretty pricey? Or
It's an excellent question. I don't have the faintest idea. And I don't know whether we're supposed to set our own standards until January 2018, when the agencies have decided what they think is safe and what they think the levels should be. I have no idea how we're supposed to do that and how we're supposed to pay for it.
Well, we have billions of dollars worth of marijuana in California sold now under the table. What's going to keep that from happening? I mean, are these people just going to suddenly be run out and let's pay taxes now?
I have no idea. It's a good question.
And the one thing you hadn't mentioned, assuming that Prop 64 passes by the electorate, and in fact the legislature tunes it up somewhere along the line, the last step in any agreement or contract that I personally have experience in is litigation. You haven't mentioned that. I mean, I would imagine that folks who are not really too excited about this proposition, whether it passes or not, will be right up front with various types of litigation, whether it be in federal or state courts. Wouldn't you imagine?
I think it's very likely there will be some litigation, and I think at some point, whether it's in a civil action or just moving through general channels, at some point, the conflict between states who have legalized it and the Fed, at which level it is still illegal, it is still a Schedule I controlled substance, that's going to have to be addressed. I think we've talked about it very briefly in previous meetings when we've touched on the topic of marijuana. Because it's illegal at the federal level, banks are prohibited from knowingly allowing somebody or an entity engaged in illegal activity to have bank accounts. They stand the risk of losing their federal charter if they knowingly allow that to happen. As a result, the vast majority of activity in the marijuana industry is done on a cash basis. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars already in the few states that have legalized it and the states that allow it for just medical use. And the concern with it being primarily cash is that naturally dispensaries and grow houses are huge magnets for criminal activity. Practically not a week goes by without seeing something in the paper about a dispensary and a security guard's been shot and killed, and people have been robbed, and people have been carjacked, and houses have been broke. I mean, it's really horrifying. In Denver, Colorado is one of the states that have legalized it. Some of the larger dispensaries have hired Iraq and Afghanistan veterans to man their Humvees that are loaded with cash so they can drive from place to place and pay their bills. So, and just a couple of weeks ago, a security guard was shot and killed somewhere in LA County. I don't remember where. So that's the litigation. I mean, again, what form that ends up taking, that's the problem that's going to have to be resolved at some point. We're going to reach critical mass here. I think that we're going to see a real problem with crime and with public safety in general until that conflict has been resolved.
But our charge from the City Council was not a narrow challenge. I'll call it a challenge because it is, from my point of view. But it's really addressing two sections of the municipal codes, Title V and Title 17. The 5 regulation is really not something we typically take up. However, Ordinance 1013 is coming back to us, which is really a Title V issue. So I guess we're now going to have to become a little bit of expertise in Title V plus Title 17.
Well, there certainly is the interplay between the business licensing and what, from a land use perspective, we're going to allow to happen. But it seems to me that the land use questions and getting that resolved, yay or nay, obviously is the starting off point. That has to be where we start. Because if the determination by this body and then by City Council is that we just don't want to allow cultivation, it thankfully becomes a moot point. So yes, you're right. Whatever ordinance we end up bringing.
It's not just cultivation. That's only one aspect.
Correct.
I mean, you have the processing, whatever you want to call that.
And the retail stores.
Manufacturing, processing, transportation, sale, all those elements. Suppose we ought to put I don't know. If we're going, if we're going to face the challenge, we're going to have to put some agendas together that are really work-study agendas that we can start to address these things. I know the City Council was anxious to hear something back in a relatively short period of time. Typically, this commission we don't take a short period of time to flush things out. We like to have public input. Whether we agree with the public or not isn't necessarily the case, but we do crave to have that type of input. So folks weigh in on their concerns. So before the next meeting, we'll craft some ideas for an agenda and schedule it for a work study, I guess, and as part of our regular routine agenda, if you will.
Yeah, if we can separate out the strictly the land use, I mean, because there's so many unanswered questions, it just seems so difficult to make a decision with a lot of the answers being, I don't know what that looks like, or I don't know what our resources are.
All right.
So I guess it's to just shrink it down to land use, which is what we should be concentrating on. But
Yeah, I would agree.
I can't help my personality. I've got all these million other questions about the rest of it, so which may not fall under our purview, but I think it all kind of plays in together. So
It's also possible, Mr. Chairman, that, that what we take back to council sooner rather than later is just the bare bones outline of what you might be thinking could work, assuming we can get all the moving parts to come together properly. I don't think that the council is expecting us to come back with, here's the ordinance that we would propose if you want to go legalized. I think rather they're looking for, give us some bullet points about what that might look like. So maybe that helps a little bit. Maybe it doesn't help at all.
No, I think we need to establish initially if it's a land use that we would support in our community and that the community at large would support as a beginning point. And from that point, that discussion, then determine, like we have with other types of sensitive uses, how we've addressed those in the past is somewhat of a guide. I mean, it's not a new process. It's a new issue, but it's a similar process, seems to me. Would you agree?
Well, I thought that when Ms. Corbett said that there's greenhouse gases and water, 6 gallons things, that would be a real nice bullet point right there. This is the impact it's going to have. And then one of the questions I really wanted to ask was, how normal is it to have contradictory language in a law?
Sadly, relatively common. But, some of these things, like the ballot initiative was written by committee, essentially. So I don't know that there was one person or one small handful of people reading through it line by line to make sure that everything was consistent. Clearly, they recognized that there weren't going to be some problems. Otherwise, they wouldn't have included in the act that the legislature will come back and fix stuff. But that's not uncommon. Just in general, one code, one statute might talk about things just like we were talking about here. The current state law, the Business and Professions Code, has different language than the Health and Safety Code. Did anybody really think it through? I don't know. Maybe it was intentional. I have no idea. If it would be helpful at all, and I appreciate what you're saying, Chairman, about taking the temperature of the community, if you will. I did some surveying of some California cities that have recently or relatively recently adopted ordinances specifically related to cultivation. I was focusing on that myself just for my own edification. If you would find it helpful at all, I could certainly ask Ms. Reyes to forward you copies of them. Some of them only allow indoor, some of them allow various indoor and outdoor of various sizes and and different regulations depending on how large or how small. So if that would be of use, feel free to let me know, and I'll make sure that Ms. Reyes gets those to you.
And some don't allow it at all.
And did your questions include the impact on the community as far as crime rates and things like that? Or are these mostly short-term?
Of the other cities that I saw, I was really just seeing what language was out there existing. I have not reached out to those jurisdictions to get a sense of what kind of feedback or fallout they've experienced. I can certainly do that.
Thank you.
It's been talked about as a windfall revenue generator. I'll be polite. Typically, licensing and permitting under our municipal code is fee for service, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we cannot, the city, we don't charge fees, we don't set fees, but fees can be set for the service that government will need to provide in support of that, whatever that is, that business entity, whatever that might be. So it's not likely, it seems to me, it's not likely to be a, quote, revenue generator. It's cost neutral. Would that be about right?
I haven't spent much time looking into that aspect of it. As a general rule, that is, of course, correct. The avenue of how you typically generate revenue, which is through sales tax, is again tricky because you're talking about mostly a cash business, where even if they have a point of sale system, which I bet is pretty rare, it's cash. So how do you know that they're tracking every single transaction and therefore paying tax accordingly?
Does the general law city have the right or the power to institute a sales tax over and above what the county and the state impose?
I just really haven't looked at that aspect of anything, even just the standard sales tax that the city collects its little whatever percent we get.
But we don't charge it. It's collected and reimbursed by
Correct.
the state.
Correct.
The agencies are. I don't believe we impose a sales tax directly.
No.
We, the city.
That is correct. Some cities
I
do.
would be interested to pin that down early on, because from what I have listened to by some folks and what I've read in some of the publications locally, is that it's, these various communities are indicating that it's a huge revenue stream potentially for their local government. Liken it to the elimination of redevelopment agency revenue opportunities. This is a way to backfill that. I don't know if it's correct or not, but I think we ought to get to that early and make a determination. Yes, in fact, the municipal government has a power to do it, or they don't, because I would think the city council would want to know that.
Oh,
We would
I
want to
agree.
know it.
Yes, no, certainly, I absolutely agree. And I don't know to what extent some of those jurisdictions that are finding that they're making money hand over fist with this industry, they might have a licensing scheme that many cities in California have that we do not have, which is, of course, they collect a tax on the gross sales or on the gross revenue on that business. Ours is just strictly the cost of processing the license. So I don't know how popular that would be, but I suspect that a number of jurisdictions generate their revenue in that way. But I'll certainly start looking into that, and we'll report back to you at the earliest possible convenience.
So on the banking and everything's done in cash, when the cultivator or the sale takes their money and pays off their bills, electricity and stuff, and they walk down to Edison with a big stack of cash. Now, doesn't Edison suddenly become a money laundering scheme? And if the city did supply a business license with a rider on it that said, we're going to tax your gross sales, then wouldn't the city be taking part in that also?
I have not found anything in case law, even anything analogous in case law concerning what the federal government would do to a governmental agency that to one degree or another seems to be authorizing what at the federal level is illegal activity. I had some concern that perhaps other funding that a city might get from the Fed would perhaps be impacted as a result of us or a city allowing that. I have not thus far found anything that seems to suggest that, which is not to say it couldn't happen in the future, a different administration. I honestly, I don't know the answer. I have not seen anything out there that informs that answer. So it's again, it's up in the air. I honestly don't know. I usually sound a lot smarter than this. I'm sorry. I usually have better answers.
Well, it seems to me like with the contradictory laws and stuff, the way the regulations are wrote, that they could find just about anything wrong with anything we do. So it depends on how upset the person was that day, whether you're going to jail or not. It seems like we need to somehow err on the side of caution to prevent it, but at the same time, how do you stop the will of the people if Prop 64 passes?
Well, here's the question too: is if it's legal, if the state of California has determined, and the people of the state of California has determined that within California marijuana is legal, period, and at the federal level it's illegal, period. One way or another, a local jurisdiction is going to be in violation of either its state or its federal overseer, if you will. I don't know how you get away from that. I don't know how you reconcile that contradiction. It's just inherent. And I really don't know how that is resolved.
Sounds like catch-22. Or maybe in this case, catch 420.
Yeah. Well, our next meeting then is August 15th, right? So maybe we ought to get our heads together, Mr. Ludicky, and individual members, not as a group, but individually, and give their input to you and Ms. Corbett, so we can put a draft working agenda together to take up next meeting on these subjects.
Yes, sounds like a good idea.
I don't know, what does next month look like as far as beyond the other 3 items on our new business plus commercial parking regulations and
Yes.
what else?
I would defer to China's the expected number of
He's a
extension
young man, it
requests.
causes us all the grief, right?
No, he just efficiently works the agenda every month.
That's what I said, grief.
More time extensions for tentative track maps. We also tentatively have a conditional use permit for a proposed gas station.
Many more? Many more?
Yes.
Oh, lovely.
Beyond those 2 items, as you mentioned, parking. But that's all, that's tentatively scheduled for now.
Bring our sleeping bags in, huh? All right. Sounds good. Well, we're kind of taking up into the meeting issues here, folks, so we're glad you showed up, and maybe you'll come back and talk to us about recreational use of cannabis when it comes before us. All right. So the next item on our agenda, on our regular agenda, is a continued public hearing for a 1-year extension on tentative tract map number 67582. The public hearing remained open from last meeting. Thanks, Ms. Corbett. So, do we have speakers on this, Mr. Ludicky?
There are no speakers on this item, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We've heard two staff reports on this previously. one at the last meeting and one in our staff briefing. Does anyone care to hear any more about it? All right, then. No speakers? None? All right. So without objection, we'll close the public hearing and consider a motion on item 2A.
I move that we grant a time extension to June 18th, 2017, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised conditions list attachment to resolution number 07-30.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. The next items, number of items, are new public hearings. Item number 3A is a public hearing on tentative track map number 60489. So without objection, the public hearing is open. Do we have speakers on this item?
No speaker card on this item, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Does anyone care to hear a staff report on this? No? All right, then. It's appropriate to close the public hearing without objection and consider a motion.
I move that we grant a time extension to June 18th, 2017, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised conditions list attachment to resolution number 07-25.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. The next item is item 3B, which is a new public hearing on tentative track map number 60885. So without objection, the public hearing is open on this item. Do we have any speakers, Mr. Ludicky?
No speakers on this item, Mr. Chairman.
All right. What's your pleasure, folks? You want to hear a staff report again? No? All right, then. So then, without objection, we'll close the public hearing and consider a motion on 3B.
I'll make the motion to grant a one-year extension to July 18th, 2017, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised condition list, attachments to resolution number 05-38.
Second.
Thank you. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. You know what I forgot to mention, folks, and it's a matter of public record, actually, that we have received correspondence from the applicants on these matters, which are called uncontested letters, which means that the applicants or their representative have indicated that they have no objections to the conditions we're placing upon these tract maps. So, just for the record. All right. We are now on 3C? 3C. All right. It's a new public hearing on tentative tract map number 61574. So without objection, the public hearing is open. Do we have a speaker?
No speaker on this item, Mr.
No
Chairman.
speakers. All right, then. You don't care to hear the staff report? Nope. All right. So without objection, the public hearing is open. We'll consider a motion.
I move that we grant a one-year extension to July 17, 2017, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised conditions list attachment to resolution number 06-56.
Second.
Thank you. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 4-0.
Next item is item 3D, which is a new public hearing on tentative tract map number 61734. So without objection, the public hearing is open. Do we have speakers on this?
No, Mr. Chairman.
No? All right, thank you. Care to hear a staff report or questions on this? No? This is the last extension available for this map, at least according to the staff report. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. So then, without objection, we'll close the public hearing. Consider a motion.
I move that we grant a one-year extension to July 18th, 2017, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised conditions list, attachment to resolution number 05-42.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 4-0.
All right, thank you. Next item is item 3E, like Edward, right?
Yes.
Which is a new public hearing on tentative tract map 62485. So without objection, the public hearing is open on this item. Do we have speakers on this, Mr. Ludicky?
There are no speakers on this item, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. This is the second of the 3 available extensions, right? Okay. So without objection, the public hearing is closed, and we'll consider a motion.
I'll make a motion. Grant a one-year extension to July 18, 2017, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised condition list. Attachments to resolution number 06-58.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Item 3F is next. It's a new public hearing on tentative tract map 63031. So without objection, public hearing is open. Do we have speakers on this?
I have no speaker card on this item, Mr. Chairman.
None?
None.
All right, thank you. So, anyone care to hear a staff report? Nope. So we'll close the public hearing without objection and consider a motion.
I move that we grant a time extension to June 19th, 2017, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised conditions list, attachment to resolution number 06-50.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Next public hearing is item 3G, which is a new public hearing on tentative tract map number 63112. So without objection, the public hearing is open on this item. Do we have speaker cards on this one?
Yes, you have a speaker's card on this item, Mr. Chairman.
All right, then we'll hear a staff report.
Good evening, Chairman, Commissioners. This is a time extension request for TTM 63112. The applicant is Bayshore LLC. This is on 32 acres located on the southeast corner of 15th Street East and Avenue H8. The subdivision is for 126 single-family lots in the R7000 zone. This map was originally approved on June 19, 2006. As a result, and in 2008, the Commission granted a one-year extension until June of 2009. As a result of a series of state extensions, the expiration was carried through June of this year, 2016. This is a request for an extension so that the expiration would carry to June 19, 2017. Staff updated conditions for this map and provided some recommendations in regards to street improvements and the conditions as listed in the revised conditions list reflect the revisions requested by staff, including an extension of A Street to the east, connecting with 16th Street East, and a connection of Avenue H12 between I and J Street, which is consistent with staff's approach with many of these time extension requests. Often we take a look at the street pattern and the street network and propose recommendations that may improve street connectivity. In addition, we review the map in light of our master plan of trails and bikeways and implement any improvements that are called out by the plan. In summary, we've provided a number of recommendations in regards to the improvements, specifically along 15th Street East. There are some mobile home parks in the area, and we provided some recommendations in regards to the treatment of 15th Street East. And what we think is a reasonable recommendation for improving that particular street. This concludes staff's report. Welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you. You hear from the speaker, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. John McClelland.
Welcome. Hang on a second, Mr. McCollum. Is the microphone on?
Can you hear me now?
I can now.
All right. You see the homes on the right side? That's Desert Classics. And we have little small cul-de-sacs and things like that. Well, we either can go out 18th Street East, which is on the far right side, or we come out H12 down 15th East. There is not enough room to bring 120-something houses back up in there. There's very little room on 15th East. If you have, from the mobile home there on the bottom, right under the map, if cars are parked out there, you might be able to get 2 cars by there going about 15 miles an hour. At the end of the block, 15th East and I, there's another end of a trailer park. They would have to tear out half that trailer park to make that road wide enough. And we're just worried about the over, I guess you would say, abundance of houses. You know, that's a lot of houses to put in that little lot. It's, I don't think we have more than maybe 110 in our whole little subdivision that goes from like H8 around and then down to 18th Street and I. So you're going to put 126 homes, cram them in there. What are we going to do with the traffic? You know, our area is a residential area with young kids. They play in the street. They do whatever they want. You know, so if maybe you can put an outlet on H8 and not mess with the southern part of that, you know, let them go out on H8 to either 20th or to Challenger. So that's what we're really worried about, is the overpopulation of that area. Now, granted, we call about that lot all the time because it's illegal dumping. We will put up with that other than have 126 homes.
So how would you
I mean, maybe if you
how
do.
would you respond, sir, if I don't know how many years ago the opportunity to build the home you lived in?
Our homes were built in 1992.
So if in 1991 folks stood up and said, we don't want that there, then you wouldn't have a place to live, would you?
Well, no, but I'm not worried about the building the homes. It's just the number.
Okay.
You know, maybe
We'll ask staff to address your concerns about traffic and lot yield, which comparatively to where you live, for instance, what that might look like.
Yeah, because one quick thing, I wanted to come down here because behind my house, up on the right where it says H8, when I bought my house, I had a beautiful view of the Tehachapi Mountains. I worked down below. I came home one day and they put 2-story houses up. So I don't have any view anymore.
All right, thanks, Mr. McCollum.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? No? All right. Mr. Ing?
I'll speak on land use, zoning, and density, and then I may defer to Michelle in regards to traffic and streets.
Thank you.
The property is designated urban residential by the general plan, and it's zoned R7000. R7000 meaning the lot sizes are a minimum of 7,000 square feet. The proposed lots are at a minimum of 7,000 square feet, consistent with the zoning of R7000, which is also consistent with the neighborhood directly east of this project site. So as far as zoning is concerned, the lot sizes are consistent with the zoning and density. And I'll defer to Michelle on streets.
So, if in fact this particular project, which has been hanging around for 11 years, 10 years plus the application process, maybe 12 years, if it ever goes to final map, which would be no later than a year from now, it might get built. That'd be a fair analysis?
That's a fair analysis.
Ms. Cantrell?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'll address the concerns regarding 15th Street East first. We have conditioned this project to improve 15th Street East, not just immediately adjacent to the proposed tract, but also south of the tract all the way to Avenue I. And in fact, they will be required to do widening of 15th to accommodate the tract's traffic and improve circulation of the overall area. Since we knew that on the west side, that's fully developed with the Friendly Village Mobile Home Park, and it will be able to accommodate the traffic of this tract as well as future traffic as well. And they're also having to widen the west side of 15th Street East, immediately adjacent to Friendly Village, directly across from this tract. Normally, we only have tracts do half-width improvements. We have asked that they do full improvements with curb and gutter and I believe sidewalks as well on that west side, so that it's a complete street by the time this track would be finished. They are also having to improve Avenue H8 from 15th Street East to the east, so there'll be a connection on Avenue H8 and street improvements all the way out to 20th Street East. So there will be two ways, two major streets to get out of this this area. The southerly street, Avenue H12, will also be improved. Currently, it is only a half-width street. When this development goes in, they will be required to build full street improvements completely along Avenue H12. So that will improve the width of H12. We have also added a condition that would require the installation of traffic calming features as needed, a minimum curb extensions at all intersections, and that will help address speeding within the tract along Avenue H8 as well as the internal street system.
So what you just discussed is no different than all the tracks we just approved in general terms about street improvements, traffic calming, yield, those issues, which are common issues that we are addressing now, particularly on 10 and 12-year-old track maps that don't conform to our current general plan.
That's correct. Especially the traffic calming, that is something we are adding to every track that we see as an extension, and new tentative maps that come to us as well.
Right. So in this particular applicant's case, if they propose to go forward with a final map for recordation, then they would have to redesign this track to accommodate all these conditions that are proposed to be overlaid on this particular project.
That's correct.
How long would that take typically? Somebody started today and wanted to bring this map to final and record it.
From submittal to final, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that the applicant's engineering time and expense, which I'm familiar with, how long would it take typically if you have an approvable map submitted?
So let me just make sure I understand what you're asking. Are you asking how long it takes to get a map final? Okay. So before we would consider a map finalized, we would require that pretty much all of the improvement plans be submitted and near approval, if not approved. The applicant would be required to enter into a subdivision undertaking agreement, post securities. This is a significant development, so there is a lot of improvement plans that would need to be reviewed and approved, not to mention the map that would need to be submitted and reviewed as well before it could be ready to go to to City Council for approval.
And not all of those improvement plans are within the purview of this agency. Some are other agencies to review and approve.
Yes, that is correct. In addition, they would also, before a map can be finalized, they would have to have a will serve letter from the water district and get approvals from LA. Well, I'm assuming this is LA County Water District. Yes. And as you know, there is a certain amount of fees that have to be paid in order to be able to move forward with getting that water letter, will serve letter. There are, sewer plans and storm drain plans and all sorts of other improvement plans that would need to be reviewed as well. So, my guess is it could take a year if they were to get going on that anytime
So if this
soon.
turns into a real project, they should have started last week.
Potentially. I mean, there is, things could move quickly if they get right on top of it. It is possible, but yeah, they would need to get started right away.
Okay? Notwithstanding right-of-way acquisitions, drainage acceptance, those kinds of little barbs that make people uncomfortable.
Yes, that's correct. There could potentially be some off-site right-of-way acquisitions that they would have to do in order to do the public improvements.
The detention basin up at the northeast corner, is that active? Is that what that is?
There is not a basin in the northeast
north
corner.
of that, I guess, isn't it? Somewhere.
Yeah, there's a basin that was constructed at Avenue H and 15th Street East. For the other tentative track maps that you see there north of Avenue H8. This project is required to construct a local basin, and it's proposed at the northwest corner of H8 and 15th Street. there's a parcel there at the very northwest corner.
But it would take all new studies with a new map to justify the basin size and
Yes,
impacts
yes.
that.
So there are hydrology studies that we would be reviewing, as well as
Area-wide sewer study.
sewer area studies, geotechnical studies, all kinds of,
environmental.
yes.
Okay. Anything we missed? Did we cover all the points? All right. Thank you. Anything to add, Mr. Ing?
No.
All right, thank you. All right, then, and that was the only speaker we had?
Only speaker on that matter.
All right, thank you. So, any questions, members? Comments? All right. So without objection, we'll close the public hearing, consider a motion on this item.
I'll recommend we grant a time extension to June 19, 2017, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised condition list, attachment to resolution number 06-51.
Second.
Thank you. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. The next item is item 3H, which is a new public hearing on tentative tract map number 63201. So without objection, the public hearing is open on this item. Do I have speakers on this?
No speaker's card, Mr. Chairman.
None. All right. Anyone care to hear a staff report? No? All right, then. So without objection, we'll close the public hearing and consider a motion.
Move that we grant a one-year extension to July 17, 2017, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised conditions list, attachment to resolution number 06-52.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Next item is 3I. Actually, I should have taken this up earlier, since that's why everybody's here, I guess. So this is a new public hearing on tentative tract map number 66620. So without objection, the public hearing is open. We have speakers on this?
You have one speaker's card,
One
Mr.
speaker.
Chairman.
All right, then, let's hear a staff report, please.
Chairman, Commissioners, this is a time extension request for TTM 66620. Applicant is Antelope Valley Engineering. This is located on approximately 8.45 gross acres on the northwest corner of Avenue M and 23rd Street West. This is a subdivision for 9 single-family lots in the RR1 zone. This map was originally approved on July 16, 2007. Since the original approval, a series of state extensions carried the expiration of this map to June 20th, 2016. This is the first of 3 available extensions for this map. Staff has revised and updated the conditions for this map, but given this particular layout, there wasn't much in terms of design changes. Staff welcomes any questions you may have.
It typically mirrors the project to the east as far as layout, access, circulation. Be about right. Okay. Shall we hear from the speaker?
Regina Rosal.
Welcome, Gina.
How are you?
Superintendent, nice to see
I'm
you.
here in the capacity of a homeowner because I live on 23rd Street. And my concern, and I believe that of my neighbors who were here a little bit earlier, is the wall that might be placed facing our side of the street. So we are on the east side of 23rd. We want to be sure that any planning that's done on this, that we don't look out onto a wall. And item number 71 on your list of conditions seems to indicate that you are considering a wall around the project. We think that's kind of inhospitable to the neighbors, for starters. I don't think any of us object to that piece of property being developed, but we would like it to face our side of the street, be a neighborhood.
All right. Yeah, hang on, you may have another question or two. Mr. Ng, you want to respond to that?
The homes here face 23rd, and so the typically, as far as condition 71 is concerned, this condition speaks to the requirement of a perimeter wall for the subdivision. That's typical for subdivisions that are adjacent to what we call arterial streets, your larger streets, your Ks or Ls or Ms. This is, so for this particular map, that wall would be required along Avenue M or Columbia Way. But you will not be looking at a wall along 23rd. You will be looking at the front yards of houses.
As long as that's the case, I think we're okay with that. We just want to make sure you don't put a wall in front of our homes.
Was that it? Thank you very much.
Boys welcome kids.
That was easy. All right. Any other speakers?
No, nothing more for this item, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I did notice a plat on this indicates a north arrow to the east. Thought that was interesting. But it's not AV Engineering's map, so. Anyway. Okay, so do we have no other speakers? Any questions from members? Without objection, then we'll close the public hearing, consider a motion.
I move that we grant a one-year extension to July 16th, 2017, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised condition list attachment to resolution number 07-32.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 4-0.
Very good, thank you. So we have a number of new business items. The first item, number 4, is draft climate action plan presentation. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Chairman Vose and Commissioners. So we're here today to present to you a brief overview of the city's draft climate action plan. Presenting to you today will be myself, David Jones, and Heather Swan. Climate is usually defined as the average weather in a place. It includes patterns of temperature, precipitation, humidity, wind, and seasons. Climate patterns play a fundamental role in shaping the natural ecosystems and the human economies and cultures that depend on those systems. But the climate we've come to expect is not what it used to be, because the past is no longer a reliable predictor of the future. Our climate is rapidly changing with disruptive impacts, and that change is progressive faster than any time seen over the last 2,000 years. I want to clarify, we're not discussing the whole science of climate change today, but we're just trying to emphasize the impact of anthropogenic emissions on the climate system. There are natural cycles which influence the initiation of climate change in the long term. However, since the industrial era, the burning of fossil fuels has added billions of tons of heat-trapping gases to the atmosphere. The emissions of these gases cause the buildup of CO2 in the atmosphere, which trap heat, contributing to an enhanced greenhouse effect. This enhanced greenhouse gas effect is not natural. It's important to note that climate is not weather. Weather is what conditions of the atmosphere are over a short period of time, and climate is how the atmosphere behaves over a relatively long period of time. This graph shows the Earth's warming climate recorded in monthly measurements from land and sea over the last 135 years. Temperature displayed in degrees above or below the 20th century average, which is along here. 13 of the last 14 hottest years have been recorded in the 21st century. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, temperatures are forecast to rise between 2.5 and 10 degrees Fahrenheit over the next century. Many national and local economies are already vulnerable to the impacts of climate events, from floods, drought, heat waves, and tropical storms. The cost of climate change for local economies will be borne through repairing or upgrading infrastructure, increased energy costs, increased water costs, and potential loss of real estate values. As a point of perspective, this map of the world displays countries based on their relative contribution of greenhouse gas emissions. As you can see, this is currently primarily a Northern Hemisphere issue. As those Southern Hemisphere countries begin to develop, the continuation of adding billions of gases of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere will continue. As a point of perspective, the city of Lancaster, that includes municipal and community-wide emissions, emitted 849,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide in 2010. 2010 was the baseline year of our greenhouse gas inventory. That is equivalent to almost 900,000 of these houses being released into the air each year. So it is our responsibility to ensure that the environment is preserved for those generations who come after us. We have not inherited the land from our parents, we are borrowing it from our children. So what are we doing about it? The City of Lancaster has taken great strides over the years to begin the implementation of many different sustainability projects. Examples include things we heard about earlier, the adoption of the Master Plan of Trails, the opening of our very successful recycling centre, Kaiser's LEED Gold certified facility, and AVTA's transition to all-electric buses. Additionally, the City of Lancaster has worked hard to become the alternative energy capital of the world and has made great strides progressing towards becoming a net zero energy city. This road has been no easy feat, but the city has crafted unique and important partnerships, attracted vitally important businesses, and launched groundbreaking endeavors which have highlighted Lancaster in the global arena. Heather will now discuss with you what we plan to do going forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Good evening, Chairman Vose, Commissioners. So what's the game plan from here? Where do we plan to go? As we move forward on this journey, staff has prepared a draft project-based climate action plan to serve as a guide for suggested projects that will not only serve the community, but also reduce the city's and community's carbon footprint at the same time. This is a starting point to begin engaging the community and begin the conversation with our stakeholders. The Climate Action Plan project began in November last year with the launch of the request for proposals. These proposals aided staff in selecting a qualified consultant who would be able to analyze the municipal and community-wide data gathered and provide emission data for the projects and the forecasting. Once the data was gathered, a process of accounting for all greenhouse gas emissions arising from our activities began. This included data on municipal and community-wide activities, such as vehicle miles traveled and energy used. These emissions were grouped into various categories for the purpose of quantification, forecasting, and eventual reduction. The data was gathered for both 2010 and 2015 in order to provide a clear picture of the city's baseline and most recent complete year. 2010 was utilized as the baseline year as it was the first full year after adoption of the city's general plan in July of 2009. In March of this year, staff from all departments participated in a half-day workshop to discuss ideas for the Project Focus Plan and provide insight into their daily activities and observations of the community. These insights were invaluable to us as we prepared this plan along with suggestions of how the city and community could shrink its carbon footprint. However, this plan is meant to be flexible. It's a living document that changes with the community's needs and is able to adjust to the city's priorities. Today we're presenting to you the initial draft of the plan that, based on the greenhouse gas inventory results, is intended to be a roadmap for action, a tool for analyzing and prioritizing projects, and a partnership between the city, businesses, and residents to work together on those solutions. Throughout this process, we've discovered that the city has made significant progress in reducing its emissions through the activities that we were already engaged in, such as reduced water consumption, increased adoption of rooftop solar on businesses and homes, and the launch of Lancaster Choice Energy. We're proud to announce that from 2010 to the end of 2015, we have already reduced our emissions by 12%. So where do we go from here? We're going to be taking this plan out on the road, if you will. We're going to be taking it out to the community for their input and feedback. As you can see here, we've already started, and with these scheduled presentations, we're also working to attend meetings of other various community organizations. We are taking suggestions and requests for any presentations. As you can see here, the comment submittal deadline is August 12th. But we are open to receiving and will be responding to all comments. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have for us this evening.
There may be some.
I have no doubt.
Anyone? Go ahead.
If the entire state of California did away with its farming, its use of fossil fuels, and went entirely with zero emissions of CO2, and the gentleman behind you said that we would have warming between 2 and 10 degrees in 100 years. How much would the entire state of California stop that rise?
That's a very good question. I can't give you the actual estimate of if one state, because it is a global issue that we're dealing with. So I think California as a state is taking the lead, saying that we're going to be a state that runs this issue to get other countries to follow and other states to follow. Because once you have that and you get all those organizations and states going with you, then you begin to reach that target of leveling off greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels, which is the state goal, which is what we're trying to achieve. So every little bit helps in us trying to achieve that goal.
I have read that if the entire state of California went zero CO2, that the limit, that it would stop warming by like 0.002 degrees in 100 years.
Right.
So we're talking about numbers that are pretty inconsequential for a massive amount of effort and cost. What I'd like to propose is that we know the climate's going to change. I mean, just 15,000 years ago, Yosemite was being carved out by a giant block of ice several miles tall. So we know climate changes, it just does. So why aren't we faced with adaptation, adapt to the changing climate, harden our electric grid, make it more reliable, make the community safer for that kind of eventuality that's going to happen, because even 40 million people in the state of California is going to have such a,
That's an excellent question, and climate adaptation is a strategy that may come out of this climate action plan. With this climate action plan, the projects that we have proposed help make the city more resilient. But I agree with your comment that maybe more focus or more study needs to be given on potential climate adaptation strategies that we can begin to employ here at Lancaster.
well, like on the East Coast, they have an ice storm that comes in, a fairly common occurrence, and they go without electricity for weeks at a time. And in Europe, they don't do that. And it's much colder there than on our East Coast. It just seems to me like there ought to be a way that we should be adapting to it instead of saying we're trying to stop it, because trying to stop it's like standing in the middle of the freeway and holding up your hand and saying stop. It's just going to run you over. I mean, some of this stuff really feels good. Like I remember Penn and Teller come out. There's a great YouTube video of them. They stacked up 18 different color-coded trash cans. And they said, this is your new trash system. We're going to have 18 trucks drive up and down the street. This is going to be, and I noticed one in the Climate Action Plan was composting, on-site or off-site. We'll be now running 4 trucks a day. Because a certain amount of recycling, certain amounts of stuff that we do releases greenhouse gases. One windmill up in the Hatchbees is something like 250,000 tons of CO2. That's just to put it in, let alone all the other effects that it has from chopping up endangered birds. And if you've seen the Ivanpah plant out on the border between California and Nevada, it looks blue. And the birds fly over it thinking it's water, and they run through those. Right. So we do have a definite impact from green energy or renewable. And I just want to make sure that we address that, because one of the things that I was on is we had no decommissioning. When one of these days we're going to find another something to be concerned about, and all these plants are going to be just abandoned, like the one out on Avenue G. It hasn't done anything. And then our current decommissioning requirements would have been long gone. And it's starting to look like a blight over there. So I'm concerned about leaving a blight that our children are going to have to clean up. So decommissioning would be important.
Thank you for those comments.
Under your plan, your proposed plan, our interests typically are focused on land use, which is a subsection 4.8 of your plan. Individually and as a group, we'll give you some input before August 12th. I'm assuming individually, and maybe staff will have additional comments to share with you. The other sections, as private citizens, certainly we can continue to give you input.
Absolutely.
And would you prefer to have that, via emails? How would you like to get it?
We are asking that all comments are sent in writing. You're welcome to email those to us, whether it's yourselves or any other member of the public can send them to CAP, comments at cityoflancasterca.org. And that goes to all our team members that are working on this project.
And that links on the city website under this.
That's correct. You can find the entire
Climate Action Plan.
Yes, you can find the entire draft plan on the city's website under the sustainability initiatives. I believe it's under green practices is the tab. And then you can find a link. You have your copy there?
Have.
Yep. And you can find a link to that email address.
I think we've all read it. Maybe not to the level of your presentation, but certainly we've reviewed it. So.
Wonderful.
We look forward to hearing all your comments.
Yes, any comments that you have not only on land use from your perspective on the commission, but as a private citizen, any other commentary that you'd like to send over, we welcome.
It's a great document. I really do appreciate all the work that went into this, because
Thank you.
When it arrived with our binder, I don't know if I was saying that, because I'm like, oh, wow. But knowing that we have time to really kind of dig into it and give our comments, but I appreciate all the work that went into this. And
absolutely.
Kind of helping us understand everything.
It was something we very much enjoyed working on.
Yeah, our normal agenda is, 500-600 pages, so some of us
What's
actually
another
read
300?
All right, very good. Anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you for
No,
doing this.
thank you very much for your time tonight.
All right, very good. Thank you.
That email address was capcomments@cityoflancaster.org.
Yeah, I think so.
It's in the comment book.
It should be, yeah, I think it is. And there's a direct link on the website, on the city website. All right, the next item of new business is a presentation on Zero Net Energy. Is that Ms. Garabay? Yeah, welcome.
Yes. Yes. Chairman Vos, members of the commission, this is an item which has been directed by the City Council for you to explore as a planning commission and ultimately make a recommendation back. As you know, the city has been in the forefront of requirements as far as alternative energy and reduction in the use of energy for new development. That actually, as you may recall, as part of the residential zone rewrite several years ago, we became the first city to require some amount of solar generated electricity for new dwelling units. And the City Council has requested that you look at another potential approach here, and I'm going to let Patty run that down for you.
Sure, and I'm really speaking kind of on a high level. There's a lot more detail that goes into the ZNE homes, but I'm really going to, kind of share some of the high level points to kind of get the conversation started. I think it's really important to have a dialogue, so please feel free to interrupt me at any point. But as Ryan mentioned, we do have an opportunity to become a net zero community, or actually we're moving toward becoming a net zero community. And in that progress, as we continue to go toward that, we have an opportunity to require that all new homes built in the city are built to ZNE standard. So obviously the first question is, well, what is a ZNE home, a zero net energy home? As defined by the CEC, a zero net energy home is one that basically produces enough energy, or as much energy as it consumes. And it does that by being extremely energy efficient, and then also by having a photovoltaic system, a solar system, to offset any energy needs. So that's basically a ZNE home. As you know, home requirements have become pretty stringent over the last couple of years. Most homes are extremely energy efficient, and really what the ZNE home adds as a new component is that solar requirement, because right now it's not required. It is required here in the city of Lancaster, and actually since we made that transition, other cities have followed suit. A couple cities to mention, Santa Monica, the city of San Francisco, they followed the city of Lancaster, and they've adopted ordinances similar to us. But that's basically the biggest change that you see with the ZNE home, because those energy efficient, or because homes are built so energy efficient at this time. One of the things that I do want to mention is that the building industry is really aware of what's going on. This is something that's been talked about for a long time, and the state is moving towards a ZNE mandatory requirement in 2020. So really what we're looking at is a REACH code. If the city decides that this is something it'd like to pursue, it's something that's going to happen in 2020. So it would basically us just be, doing something before it actually is a mandatory requirement throughout the state. A couple things to note: a home built in 2017. So our new building codes are coming out this coming year, so 2017. So any new home built in the city will be 15% more efficient from that point forward. And the really nice thing about, as we're looking at the ZNE code, we have a lot of flexibility. Originally, when we started looking at this plan, we thought that we'd have to be 30% more efficient than what will be required next year. So we thought we'd have to be 45% more efficient. But now that we've had conversations with the CEC, we actually have a lot of flexibility. So whatever the requirement is now, we can basically just add in that ZNE component and say that add in the solar component and say that we are requiring solar homes throughout the city. So it's actually a much easier thing to do than for other cities because we already have a solar ordinance in place. A few other things. Yes.
Is adding, the suggestion is for new construction. That's the caveat, right?
It's for new construction. That's right.
Right. All right.
It's only new construction. Right. That's a good point to make. Like I said, there's a great deal of flexibility, and this is not a new concept. This is actually something that's been done back in 2005. There was a subdivision scale project in Rockland, California. They built 84 homes that were built to Z&E scale. So this is quite a few years ago, and even since then, solar prices have reduced quite a bit. But at that time, they started building these homes before the market crashed. And so the developer decided, you know what, we're going to stop building the homes. We're just going to go ahead. Originally, they had planned to upsell their homes. So they planned to sell all the solar system and all the energy upgrades as part of the package. But because of the housing crash at that point, they decided, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and sell these homes and because we're now unique and we have these components that are unlike anything else you'll find on the market, we'll see how that goes and whether we'll be able to sell our homes. What they found is they actually sold their homes at twice as quickly as they anticipated. They were able to sell out all their homes, and actually right now those homes are valued at 12% higher than other homes that were built at the same time in that community. So it just goes to show you that the solar, the energy efficiency upgrades absolutely do add value, or at least they did in that example. One of the questions, that has come to mind, or that I'm sure you're thinking, is, well, what do these upgrades cost? So in that example, the energy upgrades and the solar system costed $14,000 on average for a new home. The biggest, or the most expensive component of that was the solar system. And since then, that was 2006, 2005, solar systems were quite expensive. At that time, I think the average per watt cost was $6. Right now, it's about $3. So you can, basically see that there's quite a bit of a change there. Right now, using that same model, so at that time, the model cost about $14,000 for the upgrades. Right now, that same model would be about $11,000 here in Lancaster. And that's just an estimate. But one of the things that we're doing to really understand and to see what the cost implications would be is working with the CEC to look at to do an actual modeling and to see different examples of how these houses would be built and what they would really cost. And that's something that we plan to share with the Commission in the next couple of months as we continue to have this discussion about Z&E homes. One of the things that I did want to point out is, in looking at the costs, you also want to look at the savings, right? Because that's really important to note. There is a substantial amount of savings, as I mentioned, before. One of the things that I mentioned is that the value of the homes in the Rockland, California example, there was an increased value in the home. But in terms of the savings, the developer had always anticipated that they would build, or they would create, or they would use cost-optimal designs. So they would do things that made sense, that were efficient, that wouldn't cost a great deal of money, but really would create those savings that they wanted. But one of the things that they also looked at was what were the savings for the customer in terms of energy. So what we did is we used all of the different numbers. We figured out what we, and obviously I work for LCE, for our energy company, so I have a little bit of background in the energy world too. And so what we found is over a 30-year period, if, let's say, for example, a builder were to add on the cost to the consumer, right? So they're paying for the solar and the energy efficiency. Those components would be paid off in 10 years, and the consumer could basically expect to have a zero bill for all 30 years, and they'd be saving $45,000 over a 30-year period because they have no energy bill. So that's a pretty substantial savings, and that's something that we wanted to make sure and share with all of you. One other thing that I wanted to point out is there are a great deal of subsidies available for developers. Go Solar California offers incentives for solar systems, and we know that because the state is continuing to push solar, that subsidy is going to be there for a while. There's also federal tax incentives available for developers and for homeowners if they choose to install a solar system. We also know that the investor-owned utilities, they offer quite a bit of funding for energy efficiency upgrades, and even, or not upgrades because it's a new home, but for energy efficiency products and things that a home builder would install into a new home. So there are quite a bit of subsidies and money available if, home builders, if this is something that becomes a mandatory requirement for home builders. So those are some of the things that I wanted to share kind of on a high level, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. You know, I've realized in talking with Brian that this is a conversation that's going to, you know, take some time, and we're going to work through some details, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions that you have. But, you know, just on a high level, that's where we're at right now. And like I said, the Z&E home is very promising because the CEC there is quite a bit of flexibility. And we can really kind of design something that makes sense. We can work with the home builder community and, you know, kind of talk through some of the issues and figure out what works for everybody. So with that, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Are you suggesting that you're going to engage folks in the stakeholders, ultimately, as the consumer? However, until you identify a consumer, it's hard to engage them.
Right.
So you're backing into it by engaging the development community, residential developer community, and vendors, I assume, that provide these components that may or may not be super energy efficient, huh? Similar to what we did when we took up the issue of requiring solar on every new home at a certain minimum. I'd be interested to hear, as you mentioned, you talked about resale value percentage increase. I'd be interested to make that determination of the existing homes that were built or had been built in the community with that solar component that we require. What other green energy besides furniture, fixtures, and equipment inside the structure and solar on the roof or wherever, what other components are you thinking about?
So some of the things that they mentioned in the Z&E ordinance that the CEC put together is quality insulation. They talk about LED fixtures. They talk about HVAC systems and things that are, or not HVAC systems, but equipment that's more efficient. But those were the general things. It was mostly the insulation, the lighting fixtures. Again, because homes are so efficient now, it's those type of items. And the solar really is the biggest component that kind of offsets everything there.
I had basically the same question because when she talked about the 15% increase, you know, how's that going? And because you did mention how efficient homes are now,
Right.
so how is that going to be accomplished? And
Right.
what does that look like above and beyond what we currently require?
Right.
So if we're talking about solar panels or whatever, how
How do you accomplish
what's
the
the
15%? Right,
why?
so it's how do you accomplish the 15% now, right? And then add
right,
in
if you're
solar.
still basically, I mean, if your house is, your new construction is as energy efficient as it can possibly be, but you still got to reach that level, so it would have to be by the installation of more solar panels.
Right. Yeah, it could be.
So do we know what that, I mean, would it be 15% more solar panels? How, help me do math, I'm not really good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are trying to do the math. Ms. Garibay mentioned, and I'll reiterate, we are working actually with one local architect designer who is trying to run some of that modeling for us using the CEC's information so that we can get an idea of what we're really talking about. You know, if you do this, if you do that, what does that do in terms of your efficiency, and what are the changes? And because he is in, you know, the design business, he can give us an idea of, well, if you're going to do this, it's going to cost you X to get this amount of return. And I think that's some of the thing that you're looking for. We were very fortunate, I think, in the discussion of the solar component, that we found some pretty knowledgeable people out in the development community who had this stuff literally kind of at the top of their head. They knew, you really need a system that's this big, you know, because what you're really trying to get to is this. And if you're going to do a system that big, then if you go this big, this is the rebate you get. They knew all of those components, and they knew that from a appraisal standpoint and from a an immediate value standpoint, which I think is one of the discussions we got into, if the commissioners who were here during the water discussion, that wasn't as readily apparent in those. But in electricity, they could say, oh, I understand, the buyer, goes from paying X to paying this. So those are some of the pieces of information that we're going to try to assemble. And before I forget, you do have a speaker on this item, so we'll be sure not to forget that person. But yes, we're going to have to engage a number of these stakeholders and a number of this people who have knowledge in these areas to try to get an idea of number one, what we're really talking about, and then number two, what does that do from a market standpoint, at least in as far as the environment is right now.
Absolutely. Well, there are a number of stakeholders in the community, the few folks that are developing and those that are planning to build new projects. This is a reach, as you say, we've reached before. The 2020 code isn't even drafted. I mean, it's still in the discussion phase
Right.
by the quote regulators, right? And we know what it might be percentage-wise, right, for energy efficiency. But there's just so much that then can be done in residential. I noticed that you talked about a commercial element in here too. Is that something that you think we ought to be attacking at the same time?
I guess we could definitely talk about it. The goal is for the state's goal is for commercial buildings to be zero net energy by 2030.
Proportionately, is there any idea, statistical information other than in our community, for instance, the commercial industrial component of rooftops and less energy efficient compared to the impacts on residential?
I don't have anything in front of me now, but we could definitely.
I mean, is that something we should be looking at? Maybe?
Yeah, we definitely. I mean, we could absolutely.
There's not a lot of commercial being built. However, there are some proposed, certainly. But I can't imagine that there is sufficient rooftop space, even in a big box user, to that solar would gin them into a net zero, no matter how big the rooftop is. I can't imagine.
There was a provision in the Climate Action Plan to allow you to offset it from an off-site, which I thought was for people like me. My roof, I have really a fragile tile roof, and I can't really put that on there. But if I could buy in to a solar plant that was already operating, essentially, I guess that's what the Lancaster Choice Energy is allowing us to do.
Right. Right. And there may be a segue there for this.
And actually, the way that I understand the current ordinance also allows for that as well.
Yeah, one of the provisions of the current ordinance is that you have to hit an average. That's a little bit different than requiring everybody. Even the builders who were, I think, I'll use the term, pretty ardent proponents of solar, indicated that there were buyers who didn't want it. And they appreciated the fact that the city's flexibility kind of allowed them to sell to someone who didn't want solar, but they could make it up on, other buyers who certainly wanted it.
Well, the creativity of design of structures and the roof designs and their orientation to the sun rays impact a certain percentage of homes that just wouldn't be efficient unless you create the cookie cutter of the 50s again, and I don't think that's where we want to go, is it?
And I don't know if part of it has to do with, and I would imagine, the value of your house. And you mentioned that in Rockland, that those homes sold at a regular price because of the crash, but, and now they have a 12% increase in value, but I would think that would make sense if you have an energy efficient home. If you have solar, certainly people like me who lease their solar would hope that your house would have a 12% increase in value, because you've got to sell that to your next buyer, which, you know, I wonder if people opt out of that because it does cost extra, and it does, you know, add that extra burden to trying to sell your home to the next person. But
Well, you know, certainly ought to engage the Realtor Trade Association, because they're big on statistics. I know the statistic calculator pretty well. I see her every evening and every morning. So,
lucky her.
Huh?
Lucky her.
Yeah, lucky her. Lucky me, actually. Maybe she's not so lucky, but I am. So I would think that the marketability of resale related to what limited solar is involved, but it's not just solar. I mean, there's a whole lot of other elements here. You know, the recycled water and and all those other elements, landscaping and otherwise. I'm told that, for instance, energy efficient landscaping is less attractive to a home buyer than your typical, most of us are all used to. Gold is not the new green. Although my front yard is gold, waiting on the new green to show up in the third week of August. So we'll see how all that turns out.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point, and we will try to figure out if we can get some stats on not only sale, but does the solar component add appreciably to the value. I did ask, I meet on a fairly regular basis with one of the committees from GAVAR, and the information that I've gotten back so far is that all other things being equal, if you have two houses that are essentially the same, the one with solar will sell faster, but I didn't get an indication if it sells for more. So,
yeah, those stats, I mean, it's such a limited inventory, if you will, in the marketplace, that, to draw statistical certainties from that, it would be very challenging, and one or two sales will really skew the result. So, one thing to rely on data, but the source is also important to consider, right?
Right.
Go ahead. Do you have something?
Well, I was concerned that maybe solar panels on your roof might become like a used car.
Yeah. And as you point out, on new homes, it's relatively easy to engineer it and make it work structurally. On existing homes, it's challenging depending on its age and the roof structure and all those other components. Notwithstanding what its value to the resale market may be, or whatever your return on investment that you're anticipating. I don't know. So,
well, if we looked out 10 or 15 years in the future, we're going to be seeing increases in efficiency in solar panels. They're becoming cheaper. So I was thinking like a used car. A used car that's 10 or 15 years old is worth approximately, a tenth of what a new car is worth.
Mine's worth a lot. My 10-year-old Jeep is worth a fortune.
My point that I'm trying to make is that it's possible that the stuff on the roof will be at near the end of its life cycle, and it will have to be removed from the roof, and then more efficient panels would have to be put back on. So there could be a detriment for somebody buying the home that has 15 or 20-year-old panels on it. I know I still walk through my neighborhood and I see solar hot water heaters, and gradually they've been slowly being dismantled. That fad of solar hot water dried up fairly quickly. And I'm just kind of concerned that in another 15 or 20 years, rooftop solar is just going to be a blight.
Keep your spa warm, right? Remember those days?
All this being said, I am a big proponent for solar. I mean, you know, resale value or not, I love my electric bill every month. So I think that is a big draw compared to what, you know, it is very attractive to some people to
Save money.
Oh, the big difference, yeah, that we see. But
You going to share with us how big?
well, yeah, I mean, we used to, probably our energy bill probably ran around in the summer, maybe 400 a month, and it's probably around, I haven't seen last month's. But of course, we don't run the air conditioner either. We run swamp coolers. We're super efficient. So actually, we haven't had a net yet this year.
Amazing.
We've kept it. In fact, we owe negative $21 as of this month. So it's been good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
terrific. Wow. And you have a,
We have no kids at home either. Anymore.
yeah, nobody leaves the lights on and runs the air conditioning at 68 and that sort of stuff.
Say that. Well, no air conditioning.
Right.
Lights on.
Right. So how shall we proceed on this? Do we carry this on a monthly basis and engage it, or do we do a little subcommittee with Heather's group, who she cobbles together, and participate, or something else?
We can put it on your agenda every month, if nothing else, to give you an update. But I like the idea of staff kind of working with a group of people to try and come up with some ideas here.
Right. All right, very good. All right, thank you very much.
No problem.
Appreciate your presentation tonight. Okay, the last item.
We
Go
do
ahead.
have a speaker.
Oh, sorry, I forgot too. We have a speaker.
Yes, we do. DeAndre Valencia.
Mr. Valencia, is it?
That's right.
Yes, good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me here today. My name is DeAndre Valencia. I'm here representing the Building Industry Association of Los Angeles Ventura County Chapter. We represent over 1,100 member companies and the voice of building and development of Los Angeles and Ventura counties, as well as a job creator, economic engine, industry resource, and a supportive housing for all. I'm here today to address the building industry's concern regarding the direction from the City Council to the Planning Commission to explore the feasibility of implementing the 2016 California Green Building Standards voluntary zero net energy tier for newly constructed residential buildings as a mandatory requirement in Lancaster. BIA shares the same desires to conserve energy. That's why new homes today are twice as efficient as most existing development today. By requiring developers to adhere to this zero net energy requirement prior to the state's mandatory implementation year of 2020 will only exacerbate the homelessness and housing crisis, not to mention the damage that you'll put on your stagnant economic recovery. Currently, the city of Lancaster has a 9-year housing shortage of 9,240 units. In 2014, you built 106 homes. In 2015, you built 95 homes, and these were considered California boom years. Okay. Using these figures, it'll take the city of Lancaster over 9 years just to get to the demand that you currently need today. Taking that into account, studies have shown implementing these net zero energy requirements, the initial effect will be a sharp reduction in new construction activity. This will persist until the developers and contractors acquire a sufficient level of expertise and capacity to satisfy the stringent new Z&E requirements. One study conducted last year showed that Z&E standards would raise the building costs by $58,000 for a typical new home. Assuming these costs were passed along to home buyers, an increase of this magnitude would increase mortgage and related costs, insurance, and property tax on new homes by $3,836 per year. According to your staff report, just a loan for a solar PV system would cost about $15,000. So we're in agreement. It's going to increase the building new homes. Other factors created by the Z&E requirements include reduced housing affordability, drop in new construction, higher existing home prices and rents, loss of economic output and jobs, and overall poverty. Understanding the deep ramifications of these Z&E requirements would have have on the City of Lancaster, BIA asks that the Planning Commission report to the City Council that it's not feasible to implement these new Z&E requirements before 2020. Thank you.
So would you share your statistical information with?
I don't have it on me, but I can definitely email Brian. He'll get that to you.
I wouldn't expect you to have it
Oh,
at hand
yeah.
tonight. But if you'd share that with Mr. Ludigan and Ms. Garibay, I would appreciate that. And I'm assuming you'd be willing to participate in whatever study group Mr.
Yes,
Ludigan puts together.
Yes, that was going to be my request for BIA to be held as a stakeholder.
Yeah, and that's typically what we have done in the past. Every time we address codes or any other issues relative to new home construction. So we'd appreciate your participation.
Thank you for allowing me.
Thank you very much. All right, then. No further speakers? No more on that? Okay. New business item number 6. What did I do with it? Oh, here it is. Shall I go ahead on this?
Yeah, it's you or me.
Well, it'll be both of us.
Okay.
So what I forget, you can jump in and remind me, or vice versa. As you'll recall, this commission considered and reviewed and made a recommendation to City Council on what has been now adopted Ordinance 1013, which has to do with, for lack of a better description, single-serve alcohol beverage container limitations within the community. Actually, all of a certain size in nearly every vendor, although there were some exceptions. That ordinance went to the City Council and was ultimately adopted, and there were a great deal of issues raised by a number of community members, business people, and otherwise. So the City Council, even though they adopted the ordinance, they have held the implementation of it till the 1st January of 2017. In the interim, they've asked the Planning Commission and who else was it? Criminal Justice to participate with staff and stakeholders in what is called a public safety strategy regarding alcohol sales, and to consider coming up with potentially modifications to that ordinance or not. And that group has formed. We've held one meeting, and there are 2 other meetings scheduled. The first meeting, there were about 17, 18 participants, I would say, folks from the alcohol beverage sales, retailers, wholesalers, microbreweries, Tarzana Treatment Center, Sheriff's Department, Criminal Justice. I represent the Planning Commission, and a number of city staff folks. At any rate, all of these players have taken a seat at the table and will consider over the next 2 meetings potentially some revisions or whatever the ultimate result will be. That will be then put in a format to present to this commission and to the Criminal Justice Commission to consider their recommendations and how we might agree or disagree or craft changes to those recommendations, to ultimately make recommendations to City Council of how the City Council ought to proceed with either modifying 1013, eliminating 1013, making changes to it, or do nothing. So it's back in our lap, in effect. Is that about right?
Yes, I would say that's true, and I think you hit on one really key point. You as a commission are not being asked to come up with anything.
Right.
You are going to be asked to look at anything that might be crafted by this working group. And
We have a seat at the table,
yes.
but our seat at the table might be, we may participate or we may not. We may engage and we may not. Just depends on how it plays out, right?
Yes. The other thing, and I'll say this based upon the tentative schedule that we were shown, they are going to ask you to, you are going to be asked to probably review quickly. You probably will see a draft of something in September. And, the goal is to obviously have this in position, assuming that it has some kind of support, have it in front of the city council by, I believe, November. So
Right, yeah, the
it's a
schedule-
pretty short time frame, not only for you as a commission to review and recommend any changes, modifications, add any thoughts, but the working group itself, who basically, from what I can recall, has 2 working meetings, if you will, in August.
August 2nd and August 24th. And then it comes to us September 12th in our study session, which is our staff meeting. And then it goes to criminal justice on the 14th, and then back to us in an actual public hearing on September 19th. And then they have another community group meeting. I'm not sure what that would entail or why that's scheduled, but it's scheduled. And then city council hearing in October, and then forecasting a potential adoption in November. Based on what our recommendations are going to be, who knows how that'll turn out, but we could end up dancing with the girl we brung. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, so Mr. Ludicky is the staff member from planning who attends those meetings, right?
Yes, I've been duly appointed.
Yes, me too. I believe I asked for a listing of the participants. Did we ever get that?
I thought that had been sent, but if it's not, I will request. I believe that Troy may be out right now. But
Okay.
I'll check.
Yeah, because I certainly don't know all the folks that were there. I know some of the people that were there. Okay. Any questions or comments from anyone on it? Any worries? Typically we take whatever time is necessary to review proposed changes to ordinances. This is a Title V issue, not really a Title 17 issue, but we've been drafted. So, is there a bonus in the draft? Is this like the basketball draft? Do you get like 7 years and something? No?
Yeah, I'd be careful about asking for time.
Well, yeah, that's the impression I got, but, if members aren't prepared to make a recommendation, they're not prepared. If you need more information, if we need study, if we need to,
Yeah, as the process.
I see what the proposed schedule is, but I know what our practice has been.
Correct.
We typically don't rush through stuff because there's a lot of issues, and particularly with this. It's a very sensitive topic.
It's a very diverse group, too, that's dealing with it, that are probably on very opposite sides of
Oh,
the
yeah.
spectrum. So to come together and find that common ground
Yeah.
I guess we'll see as the process unfolds, and I literally mean that because I'm not quite sure where this might go.
Right. Right, exactly. Well, we'll see how it goes, but, you know, we're always prepared for a new challenge. We've got about, I don't know how many new ones. Anyway, yeah, we ought to check into the draft thing, you know, the basketball, you know, as a kind of a structure. Who's a Laker guy here? I know we have a Dodger guy here. We have a Laker guy here? No Laker guys. We have. How do they do that in baseball?
Actually, Cassandra Harvey and I, when the Lakers were playing well, we would talk Lakers frequently.
Uh-huh.
And then, you know, for the last 2 years, when they started...
He hasn't spoken to you, huh?
No.
I see.
I've been disappointed.
Yeah. All right, very good. So, you have anything else you want to share with us, Mr. Ludicky?
You alluded to it, but you will have on your August agenda the parking ordinance that we have discussed. I will not be in attendance at that meeting. However, Chun will expertly guide you through that discussion.
All right. Chun shared with us, and I shared with the commission, a blog that you participated in. What was it, LA Streets, whatever it's called? What is that what it's called?
Yes, the Streets Blog LA site. Yes, I was fortunate enough when Chuck Marone was here in February. He had a couple of Strong Towns events in Los Angeles. One of those was a curbside chat, which some of you, I think, attended when he was here in March of 2015. I attended his curbside chat in Pasadena in February and met Mr. Linton, who is the editor of Streets Blog. Had a little brief discussion about some of the things that we had done with our boulevard, some of the approaches that we were implementing, and as is the case with a number of people, he was kind of fascinated by a city that's kind of out on the fringe of LA County who was seriously looking at implementing those types of approaches. Said, can I interview you sometime? And, you know, I said, sure, just let me know. And that time came in June, and, you know, I was pleased. I think it was a good opportunity to kind of showcase some of the things that we're doing and where we intend to go on some items.
Yeah, it was,
and thus far, I haven't been fired for it, so I think it must have been okay.
So it's okay so far.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. I thought it was an excellent interview, and it was spot on with, you know, promoting things that we've come to believe in. We're very appreciative. And I'm, you know, I don't know if that gets into the bonus category, but it ought to.
I think that falls under the work is its own reward kind of.
I see. Yeah, well, okay. Maybe that somebody at least buy you lunch or something. Okay. So do we have any other announcements? No, that's it? That's it?
No announcements.
Okay. Commission agenda, anything? Nope? All right. It's been a long meeting. Productive. And there's no public here? Oh, there is. I'm sorry. Any public business from the floor? You have the opportunity to address us on any item that you'd like to talk about. However, we can't take action on it. You're welcome to.
I have a couple small ideas.
Come right on up and tell us who you are.
Good evening. My name's Kevin Simpson. Regarding a couple things that came up, one is the solar for new construction. You have settling ponds on some of these plot maps, and those are required. At some point, as land values go up, you might look at multi-use and put your solar out there rather than having it integrated onto individual houses. So that like a water company, if you've got an acre, that's 40,000 feet, that's 4,000 square meters, that's 4 megawatts of power. At 20% efficiency, you're talking 800 kilowatts of power. You could, at some point, not have to take things off your roof, off your canopy, and not worry about the aging of those facilities and have the old car syndrome you're talking about. Also, the cost per watt on some large commercial installations is down well below $1 a watt, not $3, $4, $6, whatever they can get out of us as consumers. So that's something you might look at for future planning. It's more efficient. You got a few hundred kilowatts of stuff goes balls up because it's too old. Big deal, rip it all out. It's only going to get better and cheaper in the future. Another thing was the flow of money into and out of the community. As you model these things, $45,000 over the life of a system was mentioned by someone, a presenter here. That money is now available here. It's not going to Edison, it's not going for natural gas, coal, infrastructure, or out of the area. I think that's important. Another thing came up on a completely different issue was marijuana. And you're talking about generating revenue for the city. A few things there. I'm a general technologist. I read a blog called Slashdot. It's for techies. We are interested in anything with technology, and the marijuana came up. One of the continuing problems with marijuana has been lobbying by industry groups, including Big Pharma, and they had an article on this just yesterday. In states that have legalized medical marijuana, the prescriptions for things like Vicodin and all these heavy-duty painkillers, which are essentially heroin in a tablet form, any way you want to call it, it's big-time dope. It's killing people. The prescriptions per physician for those types of painkillers, anxiety drugs, anti-nausea drugs, antidepressants dropped like a rock. And we're talking thousands of prescriptions per year just because people could choose marijuana. So the other social cost, and once again, I'm living in a crime-riddled area out here. I have lost a lot of money due to, you can shut me off or not, but due to the crime problems related to methamphetamines. And my own belief is if people have access to this dope, you're not going to see, let's say you have 1,000 addicts in just one part of the city, spending $1,000 a month on meth. It's going to Sinaloa. You're exporting our cash to Mexico, whether you like it or not, whether you want to admit it or not. That's where the money's going. And believe me, they got the mansions to prove it. Anything you can do to mitigate that outflow of cash, and you got way more than 1,000 addicts out here. I live in a working class neighborhood. I would now describe as a welfare/crime class neighborhood. It's a problem. And with LA dumping their homeless, I've got people breaking into my stuff all the time, pissing all over the place and leaving trash and just ongoing problems. It's a nightmare. Look, anything you can do, look at the other social costs of your legalized marijuana. I don't use it. I don't deal it. I've got nothing to do with growing it, dispensing it. I have no financial stake in this except as a guy who works 7 days a week and is plagued by crime problems out here, which I'm getting zero response and almost zero traction from the police. I have 2 trailers stolen, 3 motor vehicles looted, 2 buildings totally destroyed. I have all my tools stolen 2 years ago. Response from the police, close to zero. Zip. Me and the neighbors have to go investigate and find the bad guys. And even when we find them, and I've got them on camera, nothing happens. So you got a rampant crime problems in some areas out here. And I'm in the city and the county. I have properties in the area. As far as the medical marijuana thing goes, I personally believe it is a good analgesic. It is a painkiller. It's an antidepressant. And people are choosing that. We know it works because they're choosing it. They can go get the dope from Big Pharma, and they're not doing it. They would rather just grow the weed. If you can let people grow their weed and get it locally, you're going to keep millions and millions and millions of dollars here and forget taxing dispensaries and stuff like that. It's insignificant compared to the other social factors.
No, I appreciate your comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, do we have anything further from anyone? All right. So we will adjourn tonight to our special meeting on Monday, August 8th at 5:30 here in the Park Recreation and Arts Conference Room in memory of the 5 officers who lost their lives in Dallas, the 2 officers and deputy sheriff that lost their lives in Baton Rouge, and the 26 other law enforcement officers in this country who've lost their lives so far this year. Have a good evening.